Jennifer Klein lived a fairly ordinary life, far from the noise of Manhattan. At 42, she was married and a mother of two. Her days started early in the morning, preparing breakfast, getting the kids ready for school, making a warm cup of coffee for her husband, and then heading off to work. Her afternoons were filled with grocery shopping, cleaning, and thinking about what to cook for dinner. As routine and familiar as everything was, there was an emptiness growing inside her. One morning, as Jennifer looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a woman she hadn't seen or remembered in years. Who was that woman? Where had the version of herself gone? The one who once had dreams, who lived for herself instead of dedicating her life entirely to others? Every moment of her life now felt like an assignment handed down to her. Her husband, Ethan, was a successful businessman. Her children needed her. Family, career, responsibilities. But Jennifer felt suffocated by it all. A healthy heartbeat, a constant effort to do good, and the belief that everyone needed her. These things were slowly killing her. One day she began to realize everything. That morning she had a heart attack. She felt, for the first time, that her body was sending her a message. But sadly, she hadn't even noticed. In that moment, with a flicker of conscience, she told herself, something has to change. But what? Where should she go? How was she supposed to face the restlessness growing inside her? Ethan was by her side at the hospital. That morning, the fear and anxiety he felt seeing Jennifer had added yet another weight to his shoulders. I need you, Ethan had said. But Jennifer had never truly felt that. He needed her, yes. But what about her? What was it that Jennifer herself needed? The idea of returning home from the hospital and becoming part of the same routine again terrified Jennifer. To keep living meant to continue serving others constantly, to keep repeating the same mistakes. But one day, she made a decision. She wanted to run away from everything and everyone. She decided to embark on a journey to find herself, a chance to start living again, alone, free. As she packed her bag, she realized how quickly time had passed. She thought about going to kiss her children, leaving a note for her husband. But sadly, in the shock of that heart attack moment, she came to understand that these things had become nothing more than burdens. Accepting that was painful, but it was Jennifer beginning to move closer to the truth. One night, while walking alone through the streets, she began to understand what it all meant. She truly felt lost. All the people around her, all those who depended on her, had become a weight she could no longer carry. And in reality, she was being crushed under it. Then one night, standing alone for a moment on the dark streets of New York, she knew she had to make a choice. She would either continue living her life burdened by all these expectations and responsibilities, or she would set out on a journey to rediscover her identity, her true self. The New York morning, with its gray sky, felt like an uncertain awakening. Jennifer stood for one last moment in her children's room, quietly listening to their breathing. For years, she never ended a night without tucking them in, but this morning she felt she had to leave without saying a word. She placed a short letter for Ethan on the kitchen table. The words were simple but clear. I need some time to find myself. Please take good care of the kids. This isn't abandonment, it's a search. With love, Jennifer. As she walked to the train station, the weight on her chest had lightened, if only slightly. She was leaving behind a life where years of effort and quiet sacrifice had been met only with silence. For the first time in the crowds of New York, she didn't feel invisible. Her first stop was Hudson Valley, far enough from the city to feel like an escape, but not so far as to feel completely unfamiliar. She rented a room in a small inn there. The owner, Margaret, a widowed woman in her 60s, was quiet but warm. For the first time, Jennifer didn't feel the need to explain herself to someone. Margaret simply offered her a warm cup of tea and said, "If you need to rest, you've come to the right place." As the days passed, Jennifer began to go outside, taking long walks. Reconnecting with nature helped quiet the noise that had built up inside her for years. The townspeople weren't nosy. No one asked, "Where are you from?" or "Why are you here?" And that gave Jennifer the rare gift of rewriting her own story. One day, while visiting a local bookstore, she met someone who would change the course of her life, Thomas. He was 45, soft-spoken, a former literature teacher. His wife had passed away from cancer years ago, and he had left the city to build a quiet life in this small town. He had found balance between books and silence. For the first time, Jennifer felt what it was like not to explain herself, but to be understood. Even without knowing her story, Thomas never judged her. In the evenings, they began taking walks together. Jennifer talked about her past, about motherhood, exhaustion, and responsibilities. Sometimes Thomas just listened. Other times he offered quiet guidance. "Sometimes the greatest freedom is learning to forgive ourselves," he said one evening, as Jennifer struggled to face her past. Over time, Jennifer realized that this journey wasn't just an escape, it was the resurfacing of emotions she had buried for years. She began to remember everything she had forgotten about herself. The poems she wrote when she was young, the books she loved to read, the adventures she once dreamed of as a child. She was beginning to rediscover that beyond being a mother, a wife, and a worker, she was, above all, an individual. But as time passed, another truth began to surface. She missed her children. In every gust of wind that carried the sound of a child's laughter, in the familiar habits of Ethan, she recalled during her morning tea. The love she had suppressed gave way to a bittersweet longing. Yes, this journey had given her back to herself, but she had a family. And now it was time to face not her past, but her future. After those first few weeks in Hudson Valley, Jennifer's body and soul had finally surrendered to silence. At first, that silence felt like peace. But over time, all the emotions she thought she had silenced began to speak, slowly, especially at night. Sleepless hours grew longer. The voices in her head replayed scenes from the past, and unfinished sentences echoed once again. One night, while sitting by the window, Jennifer remembered her last arguments with Ethan. When he told her, "You never take care of yourself," it had deeply hurt her, though she never showed it. Jennifer had always thought neglecting herself wasn't a choice, but a necessity. That night, for the first time, she asked herself, "What do I want?" A simple question that slammed into a vast, unknown emptiness and then collapsed within her. The next day, Margaret told her about an abandoned art house on the outskirts of town. It used to host summer camps, but now it was a forgotten sanctuary. Jennifer decided to go. She stood in front of a broken-down wooden house, hidden among trees that swayed with the wind. The windows were coated in dust, but inside, there was still a table, a chair, and old paint supplies. For some reason, she felt like she belonged there. For several days, she went there just to sit. Then she began to write. With a pen in her hand and the weight of years on her mind, Jennifer poured everything into her notebook. Her motherhood, her role as a wife, her womanhood, her fears, her loneliness, the moments she felt inadequate. As her emotions spilled onto the paper, she finally began to feel them for the first time. One night she wrote a single sentence in her journal. "Am I only here to fulfill everyone else's expectations?" That sentence became the first chain to break. Her conversations with Thomas grew deeper. As he shared how he found his way back to life after losing his wife, Jennifer realized something. Loss wasn't always about death. It could also mean abandoning yourself. And she had been losing herself slowly for years. Her dreams, her desires, her boundaries, even her courage to laugh. One day, while browsing the children's section of the town's small library, Jennifer overheard a young mother reading a fairy tale to her child. Tears quietly streamed down her face. It hit her. She had been providing care for her children, but she had forgotten how to truly connect with them. And maybe what her children really needed wasn't a perfect mother, but one who was present. All of this was a slow unraveling of feelings she had suppressed for years. But there was still one person she hadn't forgiven, herself, and that, she realized, was the hardest part. That night, after pouring her heart into her journal, Jennifer finally opened the photo gallery on her phone. She scrolled through old pictures, her kids as toddlers, blurry but joyful shots from her honeymoon with Ethan. Her eyes lingered on one photo for a long time. It was from one of Emily and Jack's third birthday parties. She couldn't recall the details of the day, but in that moment, she noticed something. Her smile in the photo was fake, and just like that, something inside her unlocked. Just one day before that birthday party, Jennifer had a small accident. She had been alone in the car, quietly crying in the parking lot of a large grocery store, when she accidentally left the car in reverse and bumped into a dumpster. She never told anyone, because that day, for the first time, she had wanted to run away. That day, she had wanted to go straight to Ethan and say, "I can't do this anymore." But she silenced herself. And from that moment on, she kept silencing herself. Jennifer had spent her whole life learning how to stay strong. Her mother used to say, "If you're a woman, you have to be twice as strong." And so for years, she clung to the roles of the good wife, the good mother, the good employee. But somewhere beneath those roles, she had forgotten who she really was, and she had been angry with herself for years, because she had become a woman who suppressed her real needs, who was afraid to ask for help, and who refused to accept her own loneliness. One night, while sitting alone in Margaret's house, her breath suddenly grew shallow. Her heart began to race, just like that day when she thought she was having a heart attack. But this time, it wasn't a heart attack. It was panic. A moment when the weight of the past and all her buried regrets sat heavy on her soul. She couldn't hold back the tears. For the first time, she whispered to herself, "I need help." The next morning, she left a note for Thomas and went to the little art house. She opened her notebook for the final time. She wrote for pages and pages. All the resentment she held toward Ethan, the exhaustion of motherhood, the quiet "I want to leave" that she never dared to say aloud. And finally, she wrote a single, powerful truth. "I am a good person, flawed but good, tired but honest, incomplete but full of love." The sentence she wrote in her notebook wasn't an ending. It was a crack in the shell, a quiet beginning. It was easy to write, but to live it, to breathe it in until it became part of her bones, that was the hardest part. In the first days, the words brought her a flicker of warmth, like a long-forgotten voice within her had finally been heard. But each morning, as she opened her eyes, the guilt would return, the longing, the quiet whisper that said, "I wasn't a good enough mother." The voice tried to pull her back into the shadows she was slowly trying to step out of. One morning, as Margaret was drinking her coffee in the kitchen, a small note caught her eye. It was written in Margaret's own handwriting. "You can't nourish anyone without loving yourself." That day, Jennifer decided to make her first therapy appointment. After years of saying, "I'll handle it," she finally gathered the courage to say, "I need help too." That alone was a big step. In the first few weeks of therapy, she hardly spoke at all. But one day when the therapist asked, "What is the area where you struggle most with yourself?" she started to cry. Her answer was clear. "I blame myself for my exhaustion. I see my burnout as weakness, but the truth is, I'm just tired." That day, Jennifer accepted her inner battle. She no longer denied it. As she spoke about her weaknesses without shame and got to know them better, the fragments of love within her began to bloom again. She continued writing. She wrote letters not only to herself, but also to her children. In each line, there was a woman who apologized but also embraced herself. Step by step, she added new habits to her life. She started going for walks before dawn, preparing breakfast for herself in the mornings, and looking in the mirror saying, "Today is your day, Jennifer." At first, these self-talks felt forced, but over time, she began to truly believe them, because the little girl inside her had been waiting for years to hear those words. One day at an event in her art workshop, Jennifer shared her feelings of burnout with a small group of women. There were other women in the room who couldn't hold back their tears. It was there that Jennifer realized, "I am not alone. I have never been alone." But my silence had made it seem like I was. That evening, for the first time, she sent a message to Ethan. "I have a lot to tell you, but first I want to listen. I want to know what you've been through." This message was a sign that Jennifer was ready to reconnect not only with her own inner voice, but with the outside world as well. But this transformation wasn't like a fairy tale that happened overnight. It took days, weeks, and months. Jennifer learned to be patient with herself, because she now knew finding yourself meant not running away from yourself. And finally, as a woman who was gradually stepping closer to her center, not strong, but a true self, she was ready to return to her life. After sending that message, Jennifer didn't expect an immediate reply from Ethan. Instead of waiting, she focused on preparing herself to be ready for a face-to-face conversation when the time felt right. Each day, she began with the same question. Will I be able to stand with my emotions today? 4 days after the message, Jennifer received a reply from Ethan. I want to talk too. The kids miss you so much. Knowing where you are and hearing that you're okay has put us at ease. These words created both a pain and a glimmer of hope within Jennifer. She silently whispered, I miss them too. But to see them, she needed more than just longing. She needed to be ready. She knew she needed more time to gather herself. A week later, while sitting on Margaret's porch, Jennifer received a second message from Ethan. We're going to spend the day with the kids in Brooklyn this Sunday. Would you like to come? At first, Jennifer wanted to say no, but then a voice whispered at the edge of her heart, maybe just watching them would be enough. And so she went. When she saw them in the park, time seemed to slow down. Ethan was sitting on a bench, reading a book. Nathaniel and Emily were flying a kite. Jennifer's eyes welled up. Even the sharpest guilt in her heart softened just a little with the sound of her children's laughter. When Ethan noticed her, he stood up. There were a few steps between them, but those steps carried the weight of years. They got closer, stopped, and simply locked eyes. They didn't speak. There was no need for words. In that moment, their silence was worth thousands of words. When the kids saw their mother, they stared at first in surprise, then ran toward her and threw their arms around her neck. Jennifer cried. Nathaniel's question, will you come back? Broke Jennifer's heart in two. I don't know yet, she said, but I won't disappear anymore. It was an honest answer. She was no longer about making promises, but about being real. That meeting wasn't a reunion, it was a reintroduction. Jennifer spent time with the kids. She played with them, quietly observed, and noticed how much they had grown. She and Ethan didn't talk for long, but Jennifer saw the weariness in his eyes. For the first time, she truly realized that he too had been exhausted. In the following days, they met a few more times. Jennifer took short walks with the kids, they drew pictures together, and read books. As for Ethan, small conversations started to form between them. At first, they were still tense, but over time, they began to talk not just about the kids, but about themselves as well. One evening, Ethan looked at Jennifer and said, we used to try to fix everything. Now I'm just trying to understand. I'm not blaming you, but I really want to know what you've been through. Jennifer stayed silent. Then with a deep breath, she said, I'm still trying to understand what I've been through too, but I'm not running anymore. This conversation didn't restart their relationship, but it laid the foundation for something entirely new, a real, raw, fragile, but honest foundation. One day, as Jennifer said goodbye to the kids and headed back to the town where she had been staying, Emily slipped a small note into her hand. You're our mom no matter where you go. We love you. That note marked the center of Jennifer's journey. No matter where she was, as long as she didn't forget who she was, the bonds of love would always be there. But in order for those bonds to come back to life, she had to make peace with herself first. And so, returning wasn't just about going back to a home. It was about returning to a true self. But there was no rush. This time Jennifer was moving forward, feeling what she was going through, not running, not hiding, in her own rhythm. After that first meeting in Brooklyn, Jennifer couldn't describe what she was feeling for a few days. A feeling of guilt, lodged deep inside her, had started to unravel with the warmth of her children's embrace, but she still couldn't forgive herself. One evening, she asked Margaret, does being a mother mean I have to forget my womanhood? Margaret looked at her, wisdom in her eyes from years of life experience. You are a woman, Jennifer, not just a mother or a wife. Everyone tried to define you by something, but you never defined yourself. For the first time, you've started to speak with your own voice. These words loosened another knot inside Jennifer. One day, while walking outside the city, a cabin caught her attention. Its sign read, Freelance Writing Workshop. Hear yourself in silence. On a sudden impulse, she walked inside. There were only 5 people in the room, each sitting around a small table, writing in their notebooks. It was quiet, but there was an intensity in the air, perhaps the sound of inner confrontations. For the first time, Jennifer began to speak honestly with herself. She wrote down the sentences she had been afraid to write. Sometimes their well-being doesn't change how badly I feel. I need myself as much as they need me. Love shouldn't just be about giving, it should also be about truly wanting. Each week spent in the workshop slowly changed Jennifer. At first, she wrote small notes, then she turned them into short stories. One day, she found herself writing a letter to her late mother. Her mother had passed away years ago, but in that letter, Jennifer felt as though she was speaking to her for the first time. "Mom, I was afraid of becoming like you, a woman who always forgets herself, silently crying, left alone with the overwhelming emotions inside. But now I'm more like you, because now I've decided to be brave too." This inner confrontation was gradually transforming Jennifer, but it wasn't an easy path. Some nights she would wake up, feeling an indescribable emptiness in her heart. She still felt incomplete, still felt inadequate. But this time she wasn't running from those feelings. She dared to stay with them. One day Ethan said he wanted to take the kids to a theater play. Jennifer wanted to go too. "Just as an observer," she said, and that's how it was. There was a scene in the play, a woman who couldn't tell her child that she loved them because she had never heard those words from her own mother. Jennifer's tears fell. Emily noticed and held her mother's hand with her little one. That night, Ethan drove Jennifer back to where she was staying. The car was silent. Then Jennifer lowered her head and whispered, "I'm tired, but for the first time, I feel so close to myself." Ethan nodded. "I'm seeing you for the first time too." These words were an unexpected relief for Jennifer. Someone trying to understand her felt like a light shining through the midst of all that chaos. In the following days, Jennifer said her goodbyes to Margaret. She gathered the writings she had worked on and decided to return to New York. But this wasn't an escape. It was a choice. Not about opening a new chapter, but about rewriting the old one. Keeping the promise she made to herself, finishing the unfinished stories. She had so much to say to Ethan, to the kids, to herself. But this time she would speak not with words, but with her presence. With her patience, her love, her determination. Jennifer's return wasn't a grand display. When she quietly stepped through the door, Emily was drawing at the kitchen table. Nathaniel was playing with his toys in his room. Ethan was busy with a file. Everything was normal, but within that normal, Jennifer was completely different. Nathaniel looked up, saw his mother, and smiled. "Welcome back," he said, just that. Jennifer sat beside him. "I'm here," she said. "This time, to stay." Months later, walking through the streets of New York, Jennifer was no longer the same woman. The same face, the same hair, maybe the same walk. But everything inside her had changed. It was no longer the reflection in others' eyes, but the truth within her own eyes that guided her. She hadn't left behind everything that disturbed her inner silence. She had learned to live with them. Her relationship with her children was slower, more deliberate. She was no longer the mother who tried to give them everything, but the mother who was there with them, who truly saw them. While drawing together, Emily now opened not only her pencils but also her heart. Nathaniel had declared Jennifer his superhero in his games, because now his mother was truly there, really there. Over time, Jennifer's relationship with Ethan had reshaped. They had needed to remember not what they were to each other, but who they truly were. Some evenings they would cook dinner together. The silence was still there, but this time it was peaceful. The spaces between them were filled not with fear, but with understanding. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Jennifer turned to Ethan. She had a notebook in her hand, something she had never shown anyone, the writings from the workshop. She felt it was time to share them. These are things I wrote when I was away, but I don't need to hide them anymore," she said. Ethan carefully flipped through the pages. Among the pages were hurt, longing, guilt, but most of all, hope. "Have you thought about publishing these?" Ethan asked. Jennifer shook her head. "Yes, maybe one day other women will want to read them too. Women who forgot themselves but are remembering again." That night, Jennifer looked out the window at the city. The same streetlights, the same hum. But the city inside her had changed. She now had a place in the city, not just in her husband and children's lives, but in her own life too. The first story she wrote was accepted by a small magazine. When the editor said, I haven't read such simple yet profound writing in a long time. Jennifer couldn't hold back her tears. These tears weren't from pain or regret. They were the recognition of an existence. A woman saying, "I am here." A year later, Jennifer grabbed her morning coffee and stepped into the garden. The children were inside preparing breakfast. Ethan watched her from the window. Jennifer took a deep breath, a calm smile on her face. "I'm a good person, flawed, but good. Tired, but honest. Incomplete, but full of love." She wasn't saying this for the first time, but for the 1,000th time. Yet this time, she wasn't describing a truth she believed in. She was describing a life she had lived. And life, finally, was a home Jennifer had built with her own hands. A home made of love. In life, we all occasionally search for escape points, seeking to find ourselves. But what truly matters is not just where we end up at the end of these journeys, but who we become. Finding ourselves is not about going somewhere else, but about truly existing where we are. And perhaps the real discovery begins in the places where we are closest to ourselves, with both our imperfections and our triumphs. If you liked our new story, please like, share, and tap the bell to hear new stories told always.